Welcome to IAMCP Profiles and Partnership, the podcast that showcases how Microsoft partners and IAMCP members grow faster by collaborating with one another. I'm your co-host, Anthony Carrano, and in each episode we sit down with some of the most innovative leaders across the Microsoft ecosystem to uncover the strategies, partnerships, and lessons that are driving real business growth. Today I'm joined by Lucy Bourne, Director at Oka Studio, a consultancy dedicated to helping Microsoft partners grow profitably with greater clarity, confidence, and strategic alignment. Drawing on years of experience inside both Microsoft and the partner ecosystem, Lucy shares practical insights on building high-trust partnerships, navigating rapid change, and preparing for the next generation of AI-driven opportunities. So if you're looking to strengthen your Microsoft relationships, refine your go-to-market strategy, or become the kind of partner customers and Microsoft both want to work with, this is an episode you don't want to miss. But before we begin, I'd like you to think about two questions. First, what if your company's next major growth opportunity isn't another customer, but rather another Microsoft partner? And in an AI-driven marketplace that's changing faster than ever, are you building partnerships that will help your business thrive, or are you just trying to go it alone? In today's episode, Lucy shares why the future belongs to partners who embrace collaboration, specialize with intention, and build trusted ecosystems that deliver measurable business outcomes. She also explains why the most successful Microsoft partners of tomorrow may look very different from the successful partners of today. Let's get started. Lucy, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you on.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here, guys. Thank you so much for the invite.
Excellent. Well, I know we're going to have looking forward to a really great conversation. And, as we kind of jump in and get started, for our listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and your role.
Sure. So firstly, Lucy Bourne, I am about 17 years in the Microsoft channel, most of which I have spent in the business application space. So my first role was working for a really small scale-up partner in the United Kingdom, specializing in SMB delivery of Dynamics CRM at the time, which then later quite quickly morphed into what we knew at the time as Project Sienna. Which evolved into what we now know and love as Power Platform or Power Apps and Dataverse. That was fantastic, right? Worked on 40 projects a year, high frequency, rapid delivery of really valuable solutions for small businesses. And I loved it. And I wore 19 hats in a day, including walking the office dog, managing the office, anything customer facing, which was fabulous. But I really wanted some experience in delivering larger scale projects to more enterprise organizations. And so that was when I joined Hitachi Solutions, where I had a kind of a hybrid role. I looked after pre-sales for Dynamics CRM and Power Platform, but also the technical alliance relationship with Microsoft, which was kind of where my passion for managing alliances came alive, really. And it was a really lovely role. I used to manage things like app in a day, dashboard in a day, but also the really strategic kind of relationship building meetings and parties, etc., which was fabulous. And about a couple of years into that role, I had the fantastic opportunity to follow my friend and compadre, Chris Huntingford, into Microsoft. So he'd not long left Hitachi. He picked up the phone about 3 months later and said, "I'd absolutely love for you to come and work in the same team I'm in Microsoft." And I jumped ship at that point, and it was at that point that I looked after the business applications recruit channel for Microsoft. And so this was predominantly at the time when I started managing onboarding net new ISVs, so those, or as they're now known, software delivery companies, onto the ecosystem. So they might have been established already but didn't have a working relationship with Microsoft, or they may not have a relationship or a product on Microsoft at all. And so I was responsible for kind of managing their technical build, but also their programmatic and relationship with Microsoft, which then expanded into systems integrators quite quickly. And so this covered things from like ISV success through to Copilot Jumpstart. And it was at that point I kind of had a conversation with my partner, Lee Baker, who many of your listeners may have also come across. And he said, "Lisa, I've been working with establishing low-code practices or Power Platform practices for years now, and he'd done it for HSO and applied information sciences in North America. And he said to me, I want to do it for more organizations at once. And it was really an interesting day because it was the day that I went on to statutory maternity pay with Microsoft, which for your UK listeners, they'll know means you get almost no money to stay at home and look after your child. And I said, look, that's cool. I'm really behind the concept. I think there's a lot of need for it in the market here, both in the UK and North America and across EMEA. But it has to work, right? There's no way it can't work because you will be the breadwinner for a short period of time before I go back to Microsoft. And so that was when Oka was born. And about 3 months later, when I went back to Microsoft, I was kind of looking at him and thinking, I really want to join you. I think there's a need for the kind of go-to-market and sales and alliance capability alongside the technical enablement that you're offering partners. And so about a month after that, I took the call to join him too. And so that was when the brand of Oka was really born, about 3.5 years ago. Now, Oka itself, we have a really, really simple mission statement because it's one that we know that works. And we exist to support Microsoft partners, solely Microsoft partners, to do three things: scale their relationship with Microsoft, as I briefly touched on, across programs, incentives, all of the kind of intricate nitty gritty of having a relationship with Microsoft. The relationship side, what we sort of jokingly refer to as the dark arts: who you need to speak to, when, what you need to say, why you need to say it. Is it going to pass the so what test with the person that you're speaking to? Sales and go to market, making sure they've got a really, really solid value proposition. They understand their ideal customer profile. They're presenting their messaging effectively, but also looking to Microsoft as how are we using Microsoft as a channel in the market, be that through partnering with other partners or marketplace as a strategic lever. And then the final part is arguably the most important part. Are they sustainably set up for growth? I.e., is their practice enabled enough to scale with the demand they're going to drive through using Microsoft as a channel or honing their sales and go-to-market strategy? So that's us. We're 50% ex-Microsofties, 50%, again, what I jokingly refer to as ex-real worlds, kind of sales and marketing directors. And our passion is to make sure that we arm our partners with all that they need to know to be successful, but most importantly, to help them prioritize what they need to focus on to be successful. There's so much they could be doing, and actually some of it can be a bit of a distraction. And so our goal is to try and make their journey and their Microsoft pathway as clear and as simple or as prioritized as possible. So that's us.
Excellent. What, if you don't mind me asking, like what's the typical size partner you work with?
Do you know, this is ironic given that I've just talked about ideal customer profile, because there's two answers to this question. We
Yeah.
we work with what you might traditionally know as like a recruit partner. They're perhaps a bit smaller or they're newer into the Microsoft ecosystem and they're potentially really, really technically capable. Perhaps they're a group of contractors that have come together. I can see you nodding, like we've all been familiar with this, perhaps got a bit peeved at working at a larger organization and want to set up their own practice, but perhaps are less fluent or eloquent in telling their story to their customer base or the Microsoft ecosystem that needs to know about them. Or they're the other end of the spectrum, where they're perhaps larger, perhaps they're part of a bigger multinational organization or management consultant or larger scale franchise type organization, really au fait with their brand and their messaging, but perhaps need more support in scaling their delivery mechanism or selling their own division or business unit back into their own business. So they've kind of fall into one of two camps. And then the third kind of curveball camp that we've seen appear more recently, and which is really interesting for us, is the competing vendor camp. Perhaps they've created an AWS capacity or GCP, or even things more and more we're seeing competing vendors in the automation space. So UiPath or Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere, where they've been really familiar with creating bots and automations or perhaps agentic capabilities, but they've not yet done it on the Microsoft ecosystem. And honestly, Anthony, what's been really interesting is that their customers have come to them and said, you need to have a Microsoft answer. You need to be more fluent with Microsoft's capability. And they've come to us to help them articulate in the world of Microsoft what their vision should look like. And that's been really interesting, and honestly has made up quite a significant chunk of our capability in the last 6 to 12 months.
Nice. Well, I know, and a lot of times in our customer engagements, Rudy talks often a lot with our clients about, navigating the vast, labyrinth, known as Microsoft. And sounds like you're kind of like that guide that kind of guide through that labyrinth, torch in hand. So very cool, very cool.
Certainly feels like that. And it never gets any simpler,
Yeah.
hey Rudy. It's always more and more complicated as the years go by.
Well, so it's interesting. That's fantastic. Now I know something else I kind of heard that you're really into is camping. So, and I'm a camper as well. Tell us a little bit about your camping.
Oh yeah, I've got to be honest. I find it such a release from kind of the quite corporate techie world that we're in. I think there's nothing
Hmm.
more, you'll probably find this, I imagine, as well, nothing more peaceful than being in the camper van with a view of the sea, with nothing but a coffee machine and maybe a chessboard or something like that, and a bike for my little 4-year-old. That for me is utter heaven. I think it's so nice to be a little bit disconnected outside when we can in the UK. Although I will
Yeah.
say, you've caught me on a good day because today it's probably the hottest day of the UK probably ever. It's 38 degrees today. So perfect camping day, if I'm honest. So certainly what we'll be doing this weekend, and actually on Friday, so just in a couple of days, I'll be picking up my um, newest ever camper van, which has a pop top, so more room for my little lad Ralph, which will be
Nice,
really really
nice.
nice. I'm super looking forward to that. What type of camping do you do?
So like I think of like when you say camper van, I'm like, ah man, she's like into that luxury camping. Like I've done with tents with my boys. So I have three boys, and when we used to go camping, I mean the other two of them are in college now, but the other two we go in tents. So you get your your pop up tents and your head out there. I know we used to do a lot of camping like up in Wyoming and Colorado, and
Oh,
I've got
lovely.
a kind of, and I don't know if you encounter any issues of like wild animals, but like I know when I go camping in Wyoming, there was issues of bears, right? You gotta, and they would have signs like warning signs for bears, and so this is when the boys were younger, and I would have we'd buy this thing called bear spray, right? And everyone would make fun of me. Ah, I got this bear spray. I'm like, you know what? You got a bear coming at you. You don't want this bear spray. Well, my kids, they didn't think it would work, right? And they were arguing with me. I said, no, you're gonna want to make sure you have this. And they're like, but Dad, how's this gonna work if we spray this on ourselves? Like they were thinking bear spray as like bug spray, like you spray that
Oh
on you or
yeah,
something. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I could just imagine this visual of my three sons spraying each other in the tent with bear spray.
like
would
aftershave.
it have been a total disaster because you're supposed to spray it at the bear, not spray it on yourself, which is like, okay, I get it now. If they're thinking like it's like bug spray, bear spray, I can see how now why they would think that it wouldn't work. But so
I'm
no,
glad you
just more
clarified
of
that
like,
though, because my mum is
yeah,
just
oh, I
about
did.
to go to Canada on a big RV adventure. And
Okay,
I have bought her some bear spray, and I was probably under the
absolutely.
same illusions as your son. So thank you for
Yeah, yeah.
clarifying and saving my potentially
Yeah, definitely. It's
72-year-old
not
mother.
doesn't work. Yeah, you don't apply it like bug spray. You spray it straight, shoot the bear.
Shoot the bear,
If it
aim for
happened
the
to
bear.
aim for the bear, not yourself. Well, that's cool. She's doing an RV through Canada.
Yeah, she's so cool. She retired at 52 and has basically not stopped going on adventures since. She's been to Vietnam, sailed around the world on a boat, backpacked all over the shop, cycled everywhere. Now they're going to Canada on a
Oh
massive RV
wow.
trip. So yeah, she's my true
Oh,
traveling
that's gonna be
inspiration.
beautiful.
Yeah, she's going to have an
Well, I tell you
amazing
what. You
time.
mentioned your son's 4, so he's probably getting into fishing and stuff. So that'd be
It's not massive
yeah.
here. It's not massive here, but I will encourage him. He's really into rugby, football,
Okay.
and I have also shoehorned him into the canoe a few times, which he does really enjoy as well. But yeah,
Nice,
he's all about the
nice.
World Cup right now, guys. I'm sure that's taken over your lives
Oh,
a
I
little bit
bet.
too.
That's it. That's it. Oh, good, good. Well, I know. I mean, if I guess we could probably talk travel and leisure, but that's not really the topic here. I appreciate you sharing. Now I kind of want to maybe transition a little bit to kind of the story, for the with the P2P. I know, in the story that we're about to tell, like in this showcase, tell us a little bit about the client. You don't have to get into like, their name, their size, any of that kind of stuff, and maybe some of the challenges that they were facing. And it's specifically like that story, like, for the P2P awards.
Absolutely. So for the P2B Awards, we've been working really solidly with a fantastic organisation that you may be aware of now called SEER 365. So SEER have been established for nearly five, maybe just over 5 years now, and it's a really interesting background actually because they came onto the market while I was still at Microsoft. And I actually managed them as a recruit partner whilst I was there. And it was such an interesting offering when they came to me. They had basically, if you're not familiar with them, have made some tooling to make partners' lives easier when it comes to gathering requirements for Microsoft business applications or ABS, AIBS, AI business solutions capability. And so,
Mm.
what this enables partners to do is basically qualify opportunities for Dynamics CRM, Dynamics F&O, or FNSCM and Business Central much, much more quickly, much, much more easily, and potentially even with slightly less qualified solution architects, functional consultants. And it enables the partner to have that kind of complete level of quality over. If they're taking the customer through this Guide 365 journey, we know there's going to be some clarity over the requirements that are being gathered and some standardized level of quality. And so when OCA started, I was evidently really close to the team, the senior leadership team that led SEER 365. And I went to them and said, look, I feel as if there's a real opportunity to bring together senior leaders from a marketing, sales, and leadership role in the business applications or ABS world, because there's lots and lots and lots of opportunity for the technical leadership together. There's Dynamics 365 Saturdays, user groups, you name it. There's loads, and I'm sure it's similar your side of the pond, right? Loads of opportunity for the technical leadership to get together, less so for the kind of revenue focused roles. And so Rich Hughes and Rich is the Chief Strategy Officer at SEER 365, came up with the idea of having an event specifically dedicated to those roles. And we named it Partner Pulse. And that event has been running now for, goodness, well over 3 years. I think we're on our 10th edition. We run it quarterly, and every quarter we get at least 80 delegates from across multiple partners, generally around 60 to 70 partners attending. And each session we try and make it as educational as possible. So it's a full day. There's about 6 to 8 sessions across a number of different skill sets and levels. And as I say, we try and give the delegates a whole bunch of activities that they can leave with at the end of the day. And so, for example, our last event was focused completely on making sure that the partners were prepped and thinking and ready for Microsoft's FY27. Now, we knew that we weren't going to have all the answers to what a good partner in FY27 is going to look like, but we knew from some of the mood music we were getting out of Microsoft what it was likely going to be in the direction of travel. And at every event, we also try and get at least 2 Microsoft speakers to attend. For example, the previous event we had the BG or the business group for AIBS speak. So these are the guys that kind of lead the senior go-to-market strategy for each region. So where Microsoft Corp comes up with the go-to-market strategy globally, these guys are responsible for disseminating that insight in our instance in the UK and Ireland, and coming up with strategies for how it relates or how it pertains to the UK market. They presented incredibly beautifully this last session, on what makes a good partner, what partners should be thinking about, but most importantly, how they should be taking that offering to their prospects and to their customers. And we had the whole team there, which was fabulous. So led by Mark Nixon and presented by Jessica Ho, really, really insightful. And that's just one example. And the event that we've got coming up on the 2nd of July, which will be obviously the start of Microsoft's FY27, is completely focused on what it takes to be a frontier firm. I know this is a phrase that we hear a lot and has been bandied about for the last 12 to 18 months. But for us, this will be a focus on from an Oka perspective, we'll be focusing on what makes the 7 traits of a partner in what we're calling the partner genome. So these 7 traits are really focused on the areas that partners should be focusing on, like how they deal with ambiguity, how they're looking at outcomes-based selling in this world of AI that we find ourselves in. Like 18 minutes before we mentioned the phrase AI. I think that's quite an achievement. And things like how ecosystem aware they are. So this is P2P in itself, right? Like we want our partners to be aware of where their expertise lies, where they need to be looking out into the wider ecosystem to be bringing expertise in, or how they should be looking at other partners to generate demand for them. So yeah, we'll be going deep into what a frontier firm looks like. But I guess to summarize your original question, the whole focus of our partner to partner relationship with Seer has been around bringing together our hive mind of what it takes to be a brilliant partner and giving as much of it away as we can in these quarterly workshops, and giving and making sure they're as deeply educational and action based as they can be. So these partners really leave with a whole action plan. Sometimes I feel a little bit guilty at the end of the day, if I'm honest with you guys, because they've had so much over that 6-hour session that you kind of look at them and they're going out a little bit glazed because they don't quite know where to start. And so we always follow them up with what we call our Oka Partner Insights, our monthly webinar that tries to consolidate the thinking that we heard in the previous Partner Pulse events.
Excellent. Rudy?
That was really interesting. I really love your business model and what you folks are doing there, because we know when you're working with partners and collaborating with partners, those relationships don't always happen by accident, do they? And so one of the things is, can you tell us a little bit about what specific practices or frameworks or agreements that you put in place that that makes partnerships work for you folks?
It's a really good question. I think when we talk about our partners building partner to partner relationships, we always say that it absolutely shouldn't just be tactical and opportunity based. It needs to be something that you sit and plan and work on together to give you the opportunity to understand each other's motives and why you should have that partnership to start with, and why you should be investing time in dedicating resource and capability towards that partnership. And so when we sat down with Seer and came up with this concept, we knew that we had to have a dedicated what good looks like for us. And so for us as Oka, obviously we want to make sure that we are positioned as thought leaders in the space when it comes to scaling partner businesses. And for Seer, it's very similar. For them, their customer audience is exactly the same as ours. And so fortunately, that made our joint so what messaging and joint mission statement really simple. It's demonstrate our thought leadership, demonstrate our strategic capability to scale these practices, and then hopefully, the lovely outcome is that we all win. Like Seer 365 wins some additional guide customers. We as Oka are able to onboard net new customers into our ecosystem, what we call our partner accelerate framework, and it's really worked. And I think the other thing that's really important to do is constantly reflect on not just how well is it going and are we working successfully towards our mission, but also what else could we be doing? I think, the ultimate goal for our partnership with Seer is not actually necessarily revenue based. It's not about how many new partners can we sell Oka services to or Seer 365 capability to. Actually, it's about how can we position ourselves best, and that will come out of it. And so, for example, there have been some scenarios where we could actually really have actively sold our services in some of these workshops, but that's not what they're about. They're about demonstrating our skill set as effectively as we can and giving away as much as we can. And so we do reflect on that, and we have quarterly meetings ourselves to make sure that we are working towards the right track and pivoting our direction if we need to. For example, about 18 months ago, we took the call to adapt our messaging so it's not just business applications or ABS focused, it's actually Copilot Studio, AI Foundry focused, because what makes a good business applications or AI business solutions partner is not that they are just focused on that actually they have to have that broader capability. And likewise the same for data and AI. A good AI business solutions delivery for a customer needs an element of data and AI. And so we have to kind of include that capability too. And so actually, unusually, we've broadened our audience for these workshops rather than narrowed it down even more. And the other thing, one of the other reflections, kind of to your point, Rudy, earlier, is these relationships don't happen by accident. We know that a really positive outcome of our Partner Pulse events is that partners get to meet each other and they get to engage really proactively in an environment where they've dedicated the time to spending a day learning. And what's lovely is that quite often we hear anecdotes about where these partners have met each other at these events and gone on to do great partner to partner go to market, partner to partner strategies themselves. Quite often, as this is always the case, that happens over the drinks at the end. We always have a dedicated area in the bar near the venue, which happens to also be where lots of Microsoft people hang out, right? Because it's right next to their office in Paddington in London. And we always hear these, oh, I've got this big BC deal and I can't quite work out how I'm going to deliver it, or I need an ISV that does X, Y, Z. And we see these relationships, these P2P relationships form live in the pub over a gin and tonic or a pint of Guinness or whatever, or non-alcoholic drink of choice. And it's lovely. And that's such a lovely outcome of getting these partners together in the same room.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, how working with partners and partnerships, as you well know, sometimes they don't go as planned, right? Sometimes you just run into issues. Can you tell us about a time when you had a partnership that didn't go as planned and what you learned about the resilience and leadership from that experience?
Oh, it's a really good question, Rudy. So I guess my response to that would be way back, as I described, when I worked at this really small scaling partner. Because we were small, partnerships were everything to us, quite frankly. We needed them because we simply didn't have the capacity to deliver on all the projects that we landed ourselves. And for the SMBs that we were serving, it made much, much more sense for them to have ISV solutions for certain capabilities than it did for us to build it. In an enterprise world, in my Hitachi life, actually, ISVs were kind of a little less of a priority because we had enough capacity to build on the exact requirements for that particular customer. So back to this SMB delivery, delivering ISV solutions, we had, I would say, probably anywhere between 20 to 30 active ISV relationships for these SMB CRM deliveries. And one worked really, really well, and it was an organization, Click Dimensions. I'm sure many of your followers and your listeners are familiar if they're from the business application space. They really well established, really excellent product set, and actually invested really heavily in their P2P motion because that was their number one route to market. And so we had a fabulous engagement. We delivered some quite big deliveries for them, and we won. I was quite proud to be part of their biggest ever deal at the time into London Marathon Group, which was a wonderful user story use case where basically Click Dimensions was doing all the email marketing to onboard all these runners for the biggest event, in the UK from a running perspective. It was brilliant. Really proud to be part of that. But I guess with that success of Click Dimensions and their increased awareness, and actually the awareness for using Dynamics CRM for marketing really came when Microsoft tried to launch their own capability, MDM, which for the first kind of year or so of its life didn't really work very well. Sorry, Microsoft. And so actually what it did was it just drew a load of eyes and hearts and minds to Click Dimensions, because we were like, okay, well, we now know and we're open to the fact that marketing could be delivered in Dynamics. Let's look at what the alternative solutions are. And so Click Dimensions won a whole load of business out the back of that, which was great. We were delighted for them. But one of the things that really did struggle at that point, given the demand and the increasing their customer base, was their support. Their product was straining because it was at capacity and there were a couple of different support issues. And at the start, it was difficult for us to manage as a small business. We had a very small support team. They were trying to do their own first line support themselves, trying to kind of escalate to Click Dimensions as and when it happened. And Click were doing a good job at the time of responding, but it got to the point where the sheer level of support wasn't able to be dealt with by the capacity that Click Dimensions had. And I think it was at that time, we had to kind of sit down at a virtual table and say, look, we need an answer to the challenges that we're having with support. And whilst it was a problem, and it wasn't reflecting very well on us as the SI partner implementing this ISV to our customers, what it did do was it gave us the opportunity to sit down and really work through, right, click dimensions. This is what we expect. This is what we're needing. We know you're at, breaking point, quite frankly. We know that there's a lot that you're having to deal with, but our reputation and your reputation as a result is being damaged by this challenge. And they responded really, really well. And they, at the time it was quite miraculous to have like a knowledge base and a chatbot, and they delivered that really quickly, and it just made what was, a short-lived problem. They responded so well that it made us feel really confident in the fact that they were listening. They understood that our partnership meant a lot to them, and they responded accordingly. So yeah, I guess that's just one example in answer to your question.
Great story. Anthony?
Yeah, so let me ask you this now. In your experience, what does like high trust networking look like in practice? Maybe outside of the pub, right?
Yeah,
And how do
good
you
point.
measure whether it's working?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think high trust networking, if I'm honest, is something that we lost a little bit over COVID. I don't know if you experienced similar. It's so hard, I think, to do it virtually. I think it is so much more effective in person. And I think ultimately, in terms of measuring how it's working, there is no second best for your gut and your intuition. And so I think you will know if you meet a partner. I mean, for example, at Oka, we also have a really, really strategic partner with an indirect provider, Disti Arrow in the UK and Ireland. And one thing that they are absolutely excellent at is events and getting people together. But the thing that all the key elements that we've learned from that is that, to my previous point, there is nothing better than getting people together in a room to talk authentically with each other. And I think that authenticity and that honesty rings true. And so, yeah, I guess those two words would be my kind of key takeaway for this point is, in your heart of hearts, as a partner manager, as a partner leader, as an owner, managing partner, whatever your role, if that partner that you're having an engagement with is someone that you can trust, be it how they speak with you, how they engage with you, their eye contact, their body, a language, whatever, you will know. But secondly, there is obviously a need to have quantitative fact that you need to assess to check whether your partnership is going well, be it, I don't know, a number of net new logos that you provide to each other, or a certain number of revenue from a revenue share perspective you should be tracking to, or a certain number of thought leadership articles or social media posts that you do together to drive demand. It almost doesn't really matter what the metric is, as long as A, there is the cadence that you assess them effectively, and B, that you are tracking to them ultimately. And if you aren't tracking to them, you need to kind of take a bit of a step back and assess, okay, what's not quite right here? Are we just tracking the wrong numbers? Should we be considering tracking alternative metrics? Or should we just take a call that this partnership's not quite right for either of us now? And I think that concept of failing fast is really important, particularly in partnerships where, and if I reflect, as I say, back on that SMB partner, we had so many partnerships, they were so necessary that we almost had to tier them. Not every partner could be a strategic partner. Some had to be slightly more opportunistic than others, because otherwise we'd be spending our entire lives having quarterly business reviews or monthly catch-ups with those partners. And I think being really honest with the partner that you're speaking to about where they fall in your priority, because it's probably similar for them, and if they are one of your priority partners, what that means to you, and being really open and honest about, we can't do what we do without you, and therefore we expect this level of relationship with you in response. And that might sometimes be a bit off. A classic example is just that, the partnership I explained to you about Arrow. They're a much, much bigger organization than us. They're the 7th biggest company in the world. We are not. We definitely are very open about that. But equally, we know that the support we help provide them with is quite pivotal in their UK and Ireland business. And so, making sure that we're aware and we've got the cadence to feedback on, this is where we feel we've helped you, Arrow, please do give us the feedback in response, has been really quite powerful for us, and just gives us that opportunity to kind of have a really open and honest conversation. we have actually had that conversation with other partners where we've said, we felt like this was going to be powerful. We felt like this was going to drive a lot of value for each of us. It's not demonstrated that it's going to. And so we are here, we're not going anywhere, but we just need to make sure that we prioritize the right partnerships. It's not the nicest conversation to have, but ultimately it saves their time as much as it saves yours.
Yeah, if I can kind of lean in a little bit, you talked about like with failing fast, and we've emphasized a lot about communications and whatnot. At what point, like in the partnership, does it make sense to what within that context of proactive communication, understand your metrics, and this failing fast, and specifically around failing fast, like when is the time to have that conversation with the partner to say, okay, is this working? Is this not working? Do we persevere? Do we pivot? Move on?
I think it's probably at the point you have your first quarterly business review. It's as early as you can. I think once you've got those kind of, even if they're rough straw man style metrics, once you've got those, after a 3-month, 4-month period of time, you should really be having a good understanding as to whether it's having any impact on both sides. And if it's not, yes, I appreciate sometimes sales cycles are longer, but if you've not got any kind of pipeline type metrics or early in stage kind of, even if you're targeting yourself on things like generating social media articles or blog posts, if you haven't done that in the first 3 months or 4 months, it's not going to happen. And you've got to call it. You've got to be really honest.
Yeah.
And equally say, let's revisit it in 12 months, because it might be that your situation's changed, or ICP might have adjusted, your pipeline might be slightly more impactful for them at that point, and come back to it. And I think it's important to not necessarily completely close the file, but park the file as early as you can.
Well, you brought up that great term that's in the marketplace right now, frontier firms, and we know the marketplace is changing a lot. AI is, and all that automation is reshaping the partner landscape, right? So, what's one area that you see partners both leveraging and underestimating the opportunity or the risk?
Such a good question, and one I feel like I'm answering every 5 minutes at the moment. I think partnerships is probably one of the, excuse the irony given the focus of this podcast, but I think it's absolutely one of the areas partners aren't leveraging the most, particularly in this concept of kind of agentic capabilities. Because ultimately, what makes a good agentic solution is one that is truly changing the operating model, the structure of the customer, right? It's truly kind of throwing things up in the air and waiting for them to land in an agent generally. And if I'm being honest, I don't think traditional Microsoft partners, be them modern work partners or Power Platform Dynamics or even kind of Azure app development partners, I don't think they're truly historically set up to discuss business change. And I'm happy to be completely contradicted. So, come at me on my socials at Lucy Bourne, at Lucy Alice Bourne, wherever. But I truly don't believe that's what they're there to exist for. And I think those organizations that do think change management organizations, adoption organizations, or managing consultants, they are really well primed to help actually truly map out what a decent target operating model looks like for a retail firm of the future, a utilities firm of the future, enter industry focus area here of the future. And I think partnering with an organization of that kind as their technology or their agentic or Copilot or Azure AI Foundry partner is going to be really quite powerful for many organizations, because they're going to be able to go, you do that bit, you identify where the true opportunity lie, and we will then map the technology to that, rather than the other way around. Because we've seen so many customer user organizations that have tried to plug a people problem or a strategy problem or a target operating model problem with a bit of technology, and they've thought that'll fix it. But they haven't actually got the answer to how are these people going to use it? How is it going to affect them mentally? What is the behavioral change that we should be considering as part of this quite fundamental deployment of this technology solution? They've just gone problem, technology, throw a bit of budget at it, throw a partner at it, it will fix itself. And it doesn't. And you really need that kind of, particularly in this AI world, that the understanding of that human behavioral change that sits behind it and how it's actually going to land, how they're going to use it, how is it going to impact their day, how is it going to stop them going into an existential crisis spiral thought loop where they think their role is going to be completely usurped. And that, I feel, is where a true partnership is going to come alive going forward. So being truly ecosystem aware, understanding which partners are going to help you with that part going forward, if you're a technology systems integrator now, is going to be super important. And then kind of pulling on that, being absolutely deliberately narrow focused as a partner, particularly when it comes to your demand generation, is going to be super pivotal, because not all partners are going to be able to be excellent at all industry areas, all horizontal workloads when it comes to delivering technology into them. They are going to have to be able to demonstrate their expertise when it comes to that industry and that situation that those end user customers are going to find themselves in. Now, I'm not saying, if some opportunities come to you that sits outside of that deliberately narrow focus you've set yourselves, ignore it. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, when you go to market and you're looking to drive your own demand, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can talk the language of your customer. You know the persona of the individual you're going after in that customer. You're being deliberately using the specific vocabulary that's going to resonate with them. And perhaps you're even using, macroeconomic news related terminology that's going to land with them effectively. Because without that, you're going to be seen to be too broad. You're not going to be able to find the audience or find where that audience is to be able to resonate with them. And I think particularly in this AI world, where it's now, you're no longer are you competing with another Microsoft partner that does another technology. You're going to be competing with Anthropic and you name it. Enter other LLM of choice. We are the opportunity is broadened, the capability is broadened, and as a result, partners need to respond by being super focused and intentional about the personas, the individuals, the workloads, the industries that they know they can service effectively. Hopefully that answers
Good.
that.
You just reminded me of a conversation I had with the CTO yesterday, and you'll appreciate the story. They spent $66 million, $66 million implementing AI. And what the problem is they have people standing around because they're afraid to use it now, because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. So change management is very important in getting the right adoption taking place. So all those things that you mentioned. So let's look ahead a couple of years now. What do you think is going to define the most successful Microsoft partners in the next 1 to 2 years? Is it specialization, innovation, or community, or combination thereof?
Oh, it's such a good question. And I think one of the key points we've yet to touch on is the speed of change and the rate at which we are, as Microsoft partners, having to deal with that change. Now, we've all been through this before, with the landing of net new products, net new capabilities, Power Platform, Azure capability, you name it. It's landed, once a year we get a new fundamental shift in the Microsoft partner world. Now we're getting it in the space of days, not in the space of weeks or years or months, days. And so the partner in 12 months that's going to be the most effective is going to be the one that is tolerant to ambiguity. And by that, what I mean is they're able to understand not necessarily which horse to back, but how quickly to back it, if that makes sense. They're able to go, okay, we don't have a perfect answer to what it means to be a Copilot Studio partner or a Agent 365 partner. But we are going to be open and honest and authentic with our customers and help take them on the same journey that we're going on. And we're going to arm our teams with the skill set, or at least the space and the time, to educate themselves on how that tooling set or that product offering is going to positively impact their customers. And I think by tolerant to ambiguity, what I really mean is the partner is comfortable with the uncomfortable. They know that they're not going to have necessarily all the answers, but they know they have a framework to support their customer through answering those questions jointly. I think they're also comfortable with not necessarily knowing how to price or commercially structure things in the way that they've always done it. I think we're seeing this fundamental shift from time and materials. We think this project's going to be this amount of days because we've done this much discovery, fixed price discovery, estimate of time and materials days, to we think that this solution we're going to deliver to you is going to help you, dare I say it, cut FTEs or increase revenue or increase this value of this revenue stream for this customer or add an additional one. And we think that the value of this additional revenue stream is going to be worth X to this customer, and therefore we're going to charge a percentage of that. And I think the true successful partner in 12 months is going to be able to effectively basically mark their own homework, jointly come up with their customer with an outcome they think they can jointly achieve with the customer's consent and with their authority, and price it accordingly. Now, it's a gutsy move, and not many are doing it right now. But I think, and I don't think it's going to happen overnight, right? This is a complete journey, and there might be a hybrid model between, perhaps charging some T&M on the way and refunding it later once you've outcomed the opportunity, you've driven the outcome that you've jointly agreed on. But I do think we're ultimately moving to a world of almost charging a subscription for the benefit of the outcome that you have provided your customer with. And I'd love to be in that space. If we came back on this call on the 23rd of June, 2027, I'd love to be able to give you some anecdotes of where successful partners have done that. And I honestly think we'll be at that point by that stage.
It's interesting you mentioned that because we've been having conversations with partners and people are talking outcome-based pricing. So, and in fact, we found out the McKinsey Corporation is doing that as well already.
I think it's certainly much, much easier for consulting businesses to lead on outcomes-based capability because there's less cost associated, right, up front. There's thought leadership, etc. Mm. But I think, and honestly, one of the retaliations, one of the bits of feedback I've had from partners when we've talked on this concept of outcomes-based pricing has been, as soon as Microsoft charge their licensing based on outcomes, I will change my model to outcomes based. That's what I've had before. And honestly, it's a really valid response. I get it. I really get it. And maybe we'll get there. Maybe Microsoft will completely shift to that kind of consumption-based, potentially even outcomes-based model for all of these products. But my view with them is, if you don't do it, someone else will. And if you're in that if you're in that customer with another capability and someone else, AI first or outcomes first, is coming in, which partner do you think that customer is going to go with if they're guaranteeing certain outcomes? And then you're going to lose the rest of it. So I do think there's a powerful shift about to happen. I don't know how quickly, but I feel like we're on the verge of it happening pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll have to bookmark our calendars for this time next year and see what's come to fruition or not.
I'd love that.
Let me ask you this, Lucy. If for another partner listening today who wanted to replicate your success, in terms of like with P2P and like partner engagement, what's the one principle or mindset shift you tell them to adopt first?
Oh, this probably sounds a little bit like I'm being a broken record here, Anthony, so sorry about that. But I think that authenticity and openness is key. I've seen so many partners try and protect bits of revenue. Oh, we do that bit, they do it too, but we want to partner with them on that bit. You have to be so open about that. You have to be open about where the Venn diagram crosses over. Because absolutely the first deal that you both get, there's going to be elements where your skill sets cross, or even if it's with an ISV or a software development company where you actually want to build it rather than productize it or sell a product that's going to fix that problem. Be super open about that. Or even if you're, let's say there's two services organizations coming together. I don't know, let's say a standard MSP that wants to add Business Central to their capability, right? It obviously makes sense for them to partner to bring Business Central into their business. But that MSP has the intention to develop their own practice, just be open about it. Be super open about it, because we've seen really successful partnerships turn into acquisitions, turn into mergers. There's always an option. Or, ultimately they've given themselves like a 12-month time frame. In 12 months, we will have organically grown our business and we will have no need for you anymore, partner. And that's good. Ultimately, if there's a scaling practice that's looking for demand and looking for opportunities and looking to make sure their bench is kept busy, it's still a really valid opportunity for them. But they just need to know that that's not going to be there forever. And they need to start building their own pipeline alongside that and making hay while the sun shines in their own world. So I think, to summarize, openness, authenticity, being afraid to say this isn't working, or this needs more focus from your side, or being really clear on what each side's motivations are is absolutely the key.
No, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that and just all your insights here throughout, just our conversation today, Lucy. As we're getting close to kind of wrapping up, one thing I'd like to kind of circle back on is earlier in the conversation you mentioned that it's the 7 traits of the partner genome, and I mean that could be a whole podcast interview in and of itself. We're not going to go there, but for those listening, if they want to learn more about that, is there like either an ebook, a workshop, or an assessment about that? And maybe can you share a little bit, about how folks can kind of learn more about that?
Absolutely. So yeah, we talk a lot about these 7 traits of a truly effective frontier future ready partner. And yeah, we absolutely do have what we call our partner genome review. It's like a half-day session. We'll go in and assess across these 7 traits and give you some kind of real key priority areas to build an action plan out the back of them. But in the first instance, out of the back of this podcast, I would love for your listeners to log onto our website, ochre.studio. They'll find the 7 traits of the partner genome on there. And I want them to think really, really openly and honestly about how they score across those 7 traits, and then take 2, just 2, to focus on improving first. So be honest about what they need help with and where they might be able to partner to improve on those traits, and then set themselves some really smart goals for what they could look like in 12 months against those traits. And that is all. I'm not giving too much homework for this one, which people will be
That's
pleased to
it.
know.
But
Just
we
2.
will have the yeah, we will have the links though for that in the show notes for those that are listening, so you can definitely take action. In addition to the links to the partner genome review, what are some of the best ways for folks if they'd want to reach out and connect? What's the best ways for them to do that?
Sure. Probably the best way is our LinkedIn page, so ochre.studio on LinkedIn. And they can also drop us an email on info@ochre.studio. We would love to hear from them.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we've really enjoyed having you on, Lucy. This has been fantastic. And before we sign off, just you ever go camping in Wyoming, Colorado, don't forget the bear spray. You'll be all good. And enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed being part of this conversation and really grateful to be invited. So thank you.
Wow, that was such an insightful episode, with Lucy. I really appreciated just a lot of the fresh perspectives and just some of the things that her and her company are doing, in terms of partnerships.
Oh, absolutely. It's always great to get perspectives from the other side of the pond, as she mentioned, called us, yeah, on their side of the pond. And I really enjoyed the things that they help partners with and the focus of their business. And one thing that kind of stood out to me was what they call their partner pulse sessions on teaching people how to prioritize the traits for their business to become more successful, and that they've had up to 80 people attend these sessions, and that they walk out after they get to attend 6 or 8 sessions during the partner pulse, and they walk out with an action plan. As she says, kind of the partners may be glazed over because they take them through some intense training there, but they walk out with an action plan on how to prioritize those things to make them become a much more successful partner. And I really appreciate that. So that really ties into everything that we teach at IAMCP. but just a different format. So, like I said, I like the fact that they have their hands on the pulse of the business. So that's really great. Partner Pulse.
Mm-hmm.
What
And I
about you?
think, thank you. And I think we got a little glimpse into when she was talking about the 7 traits of the partner genome, especially when she was leaning in about just the importance for them to be, ecosystem aware and narrowly focused when it pertains to like with their demand gen, their ideal customers, what their individual expertise is when developing that like their own go to market so they can really talk the language of their customers and speak in a way, one, that the customer understands, but two, that really resonates, with the customer. And so, obviously, doing what we do with Dynamis, marketing, I really appreciate just the emphasis, on that and how important it is, to really focus and get specific so you can get the results that you're looking for. I also found just the conversation around just because you asked a really interesting question about like about the 1 to 2 years. What do you think for partners to look like and be successful? And she didn't really answer it like the way a lot of other folks answer it. Whether it's about your network, your community, your specializations, etc., innovation. She answered it specifically around the speed of change and how the phrase, and I haven't heard someone really emphasize this as much as she has, the being tolerant of ambiguity. And I think that, and then towards the end, the conversation you and her had about the outcome-based pricing, really interesting, and it's definitely worth, I think, looking more into.
Yeah, well, I think she touched on things that Jay McBain brought to the forefront in the conversation we had with them. And there's just an awful lot of change taking place in the partner channel right now. So it's good for people to keep listening to our podcast and keep learning more. So based on that, thank you for joining us on this episode of IAMCP Profiles in Partnership, powered by Dynamis Marketing. We really hope you enjoyed this podcast and find it useful and inspiring. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. One of the best ways to partner for success is to join IAMCP, a community of Microsoft partners who help each other grow and thrive. IAMCP members can find and connect with other partners locally and globally and access exclusive resources and opportunities. Whether you're looking for new customers, new markets, or new solutions, IAMCP can help you achieve your goals. To learn more, visit the website at www.iamcp.org.